too high. Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. It's been a long time since we did a little bit of a sit-down chat about a homesteading topic, and I figured today would be the perfect day to answer a question that I got recently a lot more in depth. And the question is, how do you weigh priorities as the homestead grows? I'm especially thinking of less ability to travel and more demands on your free time. So this is the busy time of year. This is summer. Spring and summer for us are really busy. Now in the fall and winter, we do still garden, we do still raise our animals, but there's just a lot less pressure as far as like weeds and everything else that we have to do on the farm. It's a lot slower of a pace. And so I would say that for us, our priorities are different seasonally. But honestly, no matter what the season is, there's still only 24 hours in a day. But specifically, this person was asking about the demands that a homestead can have, and I think maybe they're alluding to the fact that it can kind of tie you down. And to be honest, I really don't think that full-blown homesteading like what we're doing is right for every single person. I don't necessarily think that this lifestyle is gonna fit everybody. I am a full-blown homebody. My friends will tell you, probably in the comments down below, that it takes a lot to drag me away from my farm. I don't even really wanna go to the zoo or anything like that. I would much rather just be here doing this thing. I don't ever feel like I really need a break or a vacation. I have been in the last couple of years really aware about where my physical and mental limitations are and making sure that I'm staying well below that. And I think that that's really important. You know, are there days where I am tired and exhausted and really don't want to roll out of bed and do the things that I have to do? Absolutely. Actually, last night or yesterday, I spent the whole day preserving peaches. I made peach salsa, peach jam, and I also canned some peaches in syrup. It was a hot day, sweating over the stove, and I still had to do my regular things. I mean, animals need you every single day, especially dairy animals need to be milked every single day. And so those kinds of pressures and things can tie you home. But that kind of thing, this time of year, I know is extremely seasonal. I don't think I could do it if every single moment or if every single season required as much energy and work as gardening season. I think it's an extreme blessing that we do have a break here where we're growing. We do have a lull in the garden season. It's a much needed break. Breaks like that, that's forced. We don't have a choice. I have a greenhouse and I try to grow in that, but sometimes the things don't survive the winter in there. It's all kind of just variable, and it's kind of nice that the Lord forces that upon us. He gives us winter rest, whether we want to take it or not. But within the season itself, it's important to recognize that you really can't do it all. So I've got a lot of videos out where you'll see me making kefir, you'll see me making bread and doing all of these things. I will have you know that kefir is not on the agenda right now. I've got it in the freezer, and I also don't have my sourdough starter out. There are seasons for things where I have the time, and then there are seasons for things that I simply do not have the time. And I really try to prioritize my different seasons based on what the needs of my farm are. So in the springtime, we are heavy into kidding season, and my goats need me. I like to be there for every single birth, not just to video them for you, but there have been times where I feel like if I wasn't there, that we maybe wouldn't have live kids on the other side of that birth. And so I devote a lot of my mental and physical energy just to sitting down there with my goats during their labors. And that does take some kind of measure of planning. And it also takes honestly a supportive spouse. So Levi knows in the springtime that if I have a goat in labor, I'm useless for anything else. And he's awesome. I mean, he just picks up, he comes home from work and we'll make dinner or whatever. And in the summertime, really the garden is what takes up a lot of my time, and the priority shifts a little bit away from my dairy goats, whose kids are getting a little bit older and their grass is growing and they're pretty darn self-sufficient during the summer months. But the garden isn't. The garden needs attention. The garden needs me to weed it, water it, tend to it, and then right now we're just now starting to get into the heavy production of the garden. And in this time of year, I worry a lot more about getting that food preserved than tending the garden. You'll start to see a shift where maybe I'm able to weed a lot less, and maybe I don't trim out every piece of disease like I had the time for in the beginning of the year. And that's because at that point, or at this point in the season, the preservation has most of my focus. Another thing that I think is essential to have a homestead that is efficient enough where you can make time for things off of the homestead is everybody kind of pulling their weight, or dividing and conquering. I think that's a better way to put it. I know that there are a lot of families out there where one person really wants this life more than the other person. We're fortunate enough to where Levi and I are on the exact same page. He does work off of the farm. Maybe eventually he won't have to, but he does for right now. Just yesterday, I had been canning. I'm sweating in the kitchen, canning peaches. I did manage to get dinner on the table, which doesn't always happen in the summertime. It's kind of hard for me to focus on dinner when I'm, canning and preserving and doing whatever with food all day long. It's hard for me to think about dinner, honestly. So sometimes when I fall behind on that, he'll just come home and cook. He'll make dinner. And every couple of days, this garden needs harvesting. And there are goals that we have for our canning beans and things, and we had to come out and harvest the garden in order to keep it productive. And so we divided and conquered there, and Levi tackled the berries and I took care of the beans. And full transparency, this is a picture of my kitchen last night at 8:30 p.m. It was a wreck. I had put my priorities into preserving peaches all day long, and then we had to harvest the garden, and well after sunset things were kind of exploded, and there were still things to do. I mean, we have a whole bunch of children that needed to get put to bed, and we had just pulled in tons of beans and cucumbers that really couldn't sit out on the counter all evening until the next morning for me to take care of them. So there was still work to be done. So we divided and conquered there too. Levi nearly every night handles putting the kids to bed, and I think it's a good thing. I think when you divide and conquer and you focus on each person's strengths, things can work extremely well. So by the end of the day, me being home with our kids all day long, my patience is a lot thinner than Levi. He's got a lot more left in his patience reserves in order to handle the 21 questions that every kid has before they finally will shut their eyes at night. And so he has the capacity to be patient with them and put them to bed, while I will then take care of the harvest. So that's what happened. He was putting the kids to bed. I was bagging up the beans and the cucumbers and looking around at my kitchen and deciding, you know what? The dishes can wait, because I could have decided to do the dishes and my husband would have been fine. He's got books that he's reading. It's not like he's needy or anything. But for me, it was important to decide that I needed to put my priority into myself and my relationship with my husband and step away from the kitchen for the day and focus on my own mental health. So I had like a recoupment of my energy for today, because the homestead doesn't stop. I still had to wake up and milk my goats and still preserve food, and it's a very cyclical type life. And I think it's nice though to know that winter is coming. Winter is really not my favorite season, but it does represent a very needed time of rest. I know that this hustle and bustle and grind and whatever doesn't last forever, and so being able to see that light at the end of the tunnel is a really good thing. So remember, there's only 24 hours in the day, and no matter what you do in life, homesteading or not, whenever you decide to do something, you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. I heard that initially through Jess at Roots and Refuge Farm, and I loved that like visual. That saying yes to something means that something else doesn't happen. And so you really start to visualize consequences with that. And so last night when I decided to say no to the dishes, it meant saying yes to my husband. It meant saying yes to myself and giving myself a little bit of wind down time before I had to close my eyes and fall asleep. In analyzing those two options, to stay up and clean the kitchen or leave the kitchen and spend some quality time with my husband, I was able to weigh the pros and cons and make the right decision. And I think daily choices like that are really vital in the busiest of seasons. All too often in the busy season, I think we tend to neglect things that do foster our mental health in favor of other things that make us feel, you know, that much more productive. Sometimes we can really get into the productive mindset and forget to sit back and simply enjoy things. Like, let things go by the wayside sometimes. It's okay. I've mentioned it before in some of my garden tours or my disease chat, I think it was, for the garden, that the battle for disease in the garden is a losing battle. I mean, even if we had a garden that never got disease or pests, inevitably winter is coming and this isn't going to last. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if getting away, having a vacation or finding something to do for you is important in order to fill you up so that you can function well on your homestead, you're going to have to make special time for that. You're going to have to make that priority number one. I would say probably seasonally, possibly weekly, go through your priorities. Go through what is going to be important for you in order to keep functioning. Because, I mean, parenting is this way too. If you are not full up on your own energy, you're not going to be able to give positive energy to your children. And it's the same thing on a homestead. You could make a homestead function all right when you come from a place of burnout. Like, you could throw pails of water at the animals and throw some feed and go inside and just be exhausted. But if you can go about it rested and more intentional and inspired, you're able to be a lot more intentional, and you're able to actually care and steward things well. And sometimes it takes saying no to something. So if vacations and time away from the farm is really important to you, maybe a dairy animal isn't the right choice. Maybe it is, and you just intentionally have dry seasons in order to fit in your vacations and things. A lot of people will hire farm sitters to handle their farms while they're gone, because a lot of people are not like me. I'm a homebody. I don't need a vacation away from the farm. But a lot of people aren't like that, and they need that. And if you need that, you need to figure out how to make time for that, because fostering that mental health, as I mentioned, is just going to make you a better person overall. It's going to make you a better steward of what you have. So I think each person's priority is really going to be vastly different. What's a priority to me, it may not be a priority to you. I know that, of course, animals and things, they need your attention every day. Dairy animals need to be milked every day. Now, you can milk a dairy animal once a day. That's what I do here. A lot of people will say that you have to milk a dairy animal twice a day in order to get a good capacity out of them. I find that I can still milk. I milk once a day, and I've been milking once a day for 2 years. You do get a little bit less milk milking once a day, but it's not a problem. For me, I get about 30% less milk milking once a day versus milking twice a day, and that does really open up my schedule to where we can do things in the evening. A lot of, you know, parties and get-togethers and things go into the evening, and not having to come home and milk really frees that up. I'd say that that's probably the one thing that I make sure I do, because that's what fits what we do most. We're mostly invited to evening things, and that frees that up, and it makes it totally possible. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments, since I know that we come from so many varying backgrounds. What are some things that you do on your homestead to prioritize what matters most to you? Are vacations and things important to you? Do you need time away from the homestead in order to refuel yourself? And what does that look like? Because I know that my situation is different from your situation, is different from the next person's situation, and I think we can really glean off of each other and find some different things that really just might work for us. On the subject of priorities though, we are coming up on the school year starting again, and I homeschool our 4 children here at home, and I've been putting about 3 videos together every week during the off season. Homeschooling is very flexible. As the garden slows down, it frees up a little bit more time, so there really might not be too much of a lag. It's just, if there is, you know what happened. So I hope showing you guys my messy kitchen from dealing with peaches yesterday brought you guys a little bit of comfort in seeing that I think it's to me, it's truly impossible to do literally everything. There's a lot on a homesteader's plate. There's a lot on parents' plates. There's a lot on a lot of people's plates for a lot of reasons. And sometimes things like the dishes just aren't priority. this time of year. There's too much else going on to make that like a pristine kitchen the priority. Before I go to, there's something that I've thought about doing that I actually see quite a few people doing this year, which is taking a Sabbath year from the garden. And I imagine you could also take Sabbath year from like breeding your animals or something like that. I think that there's a lot of rejuvenation potential in something like that. So those are things to consider as well. The thing that I'm having a hard time navigating is I know that if I don't plant something in my garden that the weeds are 100% going to take over, and I worry about how much more work that's going to be to like rectify and if that would be worth it. I'm still navigating that. Anyways, as always, I will see you guys down in the comments. Welcome to the hundreds of people who have joined the channel or subscribed to the channel in the last 2 weeks. It's been a really amazing influx and response. I'm so glad you're here.